A number of years ago at this point on the channel, we of course covered the Datamining leak list for Gran Turismo 7, over 80 vehicles which were due to arrive. About half of those are in the game already. I've revised that list as we did at the start of 2024 as well. At that point there were still about 54 vehicles due to arrive, and now as we start 2025 there are still 41. So of course in addition to these we've had a number of bonus vehicles which were never included in the list, which of course makes it even better, but it will be curious to see during this year which ones of these arrive and also which ones you're most excited for. For me there are definitely some which still stand out. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into the list. First up, the Peugeot 205 T16, the Pikes Peak version. Then of course we have the Ferrari 599. This is one which I'm really hoping does arrive in this game. I could just as easily see it being a day one car in the next game, whenever that is, but I do hope they add it because the 599 has grown on me a lot over the years. The Renault 5 rally car, especially applicable now that we have news of the Renault 5 going fully electric in its modern form, but the rally car of course is an icon which would be great to have back. The REM Amiya RX-7, that is of course the GT300 car, not the road version, and as I've said before, in fact recently I said it about the Wed Sport Lexus, the re-review that I did in GT6, that I think they should add a couple of these lower level GT300 cars to kind of complement the GT500s. You could quite easily put them in a Group 4 for example, and going on from the RX-7 of course we also have the Garaya, the Renault Aventime. This one you could definitely see being kind of a meme car, up there with stuff like the van, the Alphard, the Volvo, and aside from having front wheel drive, now that engine swaps are more of a thing, it'd be pretty awesome if you could put a Lexus LFA into it and make an Aventime V10, which would be a cool little homage. We have the Mazda AutoZam AZ1. This one I would not be at all surprised if it arrives this year. I could definitely see that arriving with maybe a couple of larger vehicles and a little 3-car update. The Buick GNX, of course a huge fan favourite in the American car kind of sphere, a lot newer than many of the other muscle cars in the series, of course turbo aspirated, which is pretty different from a muscle car, at least in standard form. The Toyota Celica 1600 GT, the classic Celica. I'd be interested to see the visual upgrades on the classic Celica, maybe look at a little chin splitter, perhaps some widened arches. That could certainly look pretty cool, so again, that wouldn't surprise me if it were to arrive this year either. A car which is known for being a fantastic drag racer for front wheel drive events in particular in real life, and it certainly could have a huge amount of potential in the game as well, the Fiat Coupe Turbo Plus. For me it was never a car which I used a huge amount, but it is a very capable machine for sure, and many would say a very good looking one as well. The Roof Yellowbird, this one I could also quite easily see arriving in 2025. Roof has had some love, of course the RGT not too long ago. The Yellowbird is probably their most iconic car for Gran Turismo, up there with the CTR2 at least. Next up we have a rally car, one of 3 launches which we are expecting hopefully at some point. Initially the 1992 shape Delta WRC car. Next we have the Eagle Speedster or the Eagle E-Type lightweight coupe. We're not entirely sure which one it is. I would assume maybe the coupe version, but we'd have to wait and see. These next, say 5 or 6, to be honest I don't have huge hopes for. Maybe again in the next game if they could sort out the licensing, but of course it is a bunch of Lotus models. The 2011 and the 1996 Lotus Elises, the 2002 Esprit, that's the one I would want the most, the 1972 Europa, and then 2 supposedly racing versions of the Evora, a GT3 style and a GT4 style. Like I said, I don't have huge hopes for that in GT7, but they've surprised us with stuff before, like bringing Skoda or Volvo years down the line, so I guess it is possible. And it would actually, if you think about it, be a pretty cool way, even if it were only 3 cars, to make kind of a British pack of some kind. Not a DLC, but just an update. But if you had like a couple of Lotus models and alongside like Silverstone or something, that would be a pretty cool update. But obviously that's very much so pie in the sky kind of stuff, so don't quote me on that one. The Mark V Golf GTI, not a huge fan of the car myself. I'm more of an R32 kind of guy, of course. The 2010 shape Subaru WRX sedan version, a good looking car. A lot of people don't like it as much as the traditional Scoobies, but again, another Subaru is never really a bad thing as long as it's something different. This next one I could very easily see being a top tier fan favourite, because over time there have been certain cars which have stood out. The Lexus LFA, the Mitsubishi Evo 9, this is also one of those which might have the biggest consensus over the list, and it is definitely one of the ones I see in comments the most. The E60 M5, the BMW V10 Legend. I'm kind of surprised that the C63 AMG wasn't on the leaked list, because that seems pretty obvious to bring back as well, but for now the M5 at least was, and yeah, you know that would be hugely popular. Next up we've got the 1998 shape Mazda MX-5. Anything that's Japanese of course has a pretty good chance over time, especially something as iconic as an MX-5, and we have seen a bunch of different small variations of cars like that added. The 2002 Audi RS6 Avant, that of course was going to be potentially the first estate car to come to the game. Now that Volvo's in there it isn't, but still a a hell of an estate car, that's for sure. It would be phenomenally quick. Not as quick as the V10 version, but still quick nonetheless. It is interesting that they have this version in the leaked list and not the V10. You would think that it would be the V10, given that that was already a premium. It's a more obvious choice, but we have the 2003 shape BMW Z4. Again, kind of a curious choice. You'd think they'd go for the newer one, particularly now that we have the newer GR Supras and stuff in there. So yeah, that's a bit weird to me. I guess the Z4 has its fans, but not even going for a Z4M Coupe seems a bit odd, but we'll have to wait and see. Another potentially returning brand, and probably a lot more useful, I would imagine, than it used to be, of Caterham, the 2012 Caterham R500. I'm not the biggest fan of Caterham, but it would be very interesting to see how OP this car could be in career mode. It might end up having the Red Bull Junior problem, where the point level is way too high for its power, but I guess we'd have to wait and see. Last time around, I had the C2 Corvette from the early 60s, still on the list. I don't know if I remembered that wrong or not, because we do already have an early C2 Corvette in the game, so I don't recall which version that was in the video, and maybe I just misremembered it. So that one's here, but it's not necessarily part of the list itself. The next one is another Lancia rally car, the S4 Delta, of course the even more extreme version. Next up, one which I couldn't care less about, and I feel like for a lot of you probably won't either. Some probably will, but most not so much. The classic, or in other words original version of the DeLorean. When we already have a DeLorean in the game, I really don't see the point in having both. It's not like the original was an amazing car or something anyway, quite the opposite in fact, but yeah, whatever. The 2007 R35 GTR, this one I think has a very, very good chance, because then you'd have the original and the 2024 most recent one, and for me, as I've said before, and I know for some of you as well, that original is still my favourite R35. I think it looks the best, the price was amazing, the performance from 480 horsepower was hugely impressive even today, so yeah, that's by far my favourite R35. Next up, another rally car, the S1 Audi Quattro. We already have a version of the Quattro, but this is the white and yellow if I recall correctly. Again, I would personally prefer the road car, somewhat like a nice 20 valve, but rally version is what it appears to be. Next up, the third and final launcher, the 037 rally car, the Evo 2. That I would be really, really curious to see, because much more of like a Stratos style approach, and of course the 037 was featured in the Audi versus Lancia movie, which I reviewed a while back. I watched it on a plane. It was a decent little flick, not the best thing ever, but quite a lot was spent on the 037 in terms of the storytelling there. Then we've got another MX-5. This one appears to be the RF Targa version. Sure, I don't really care, to be honest. I'm sure it has its fans, but the 2007 MX-5 as well, I would prefer that one, to be honest, because at least, like the 1998 one, it is a genuinely different shape, which is more interesting to me. Then we have the 1991 Mazda RX-7 Type R. Of course, I love the RX-7. Do we need multiple variations? Depends who you ask. Overall, I would say no, but it's Gran Turismo, so it comes with the territory. Then we have two BMWs, a 2002 Turbo, which, to be honest, I'm surprised isn't already in the game. It's such an iconic car, and the 2002 TII, so a little bit more of a subtle version compared to the over-the-top Turbo. Both of those should be a lot of fun to drive, and potentially off-road as well. That could be pretty cool. So yeah, I'm pretty keen to see what those ones can do. We've got the 1991 Mercedes 500e. That one's also a curious choice, bit out of left field, and I'm looking forward to that one if it does arrive in GT7. Next up, probably one of the quickest, at least as far as road cars go, were it to arrive, the 812 Ferrari Superfast. That should be a properly quick machine, as the name suggests. Can't say I'm a huge fan of it myself. I'm not as much of a fan of most of Ferrari's most recent stuff, but sure, it's quick. I mean, it's literally in the name. Then, of course, we have another 911 Turbo. In fact, it's another 911 Turbo S, more specifically, but this is one of the ones which I would really want to see, because it's the 1993 shape. And last, but definitely not least, probably the single car of all of these, which I would look forward to the most. It would be expensive, in fact, probably one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive on the list, the classic, or I guess I should say vintage, Bugatti Type 37A. I, for one, would really, really love to see this arrive in the game in 2025. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. I would imagine that much like last year, you could expect maybe somewhere around 10 to 15 of these to arrive during 2025, at least if we base it on what we got last year, which was 30 new vehicles, and that took us down from 54 on the list to now about 40, 41, taking it down by over 10 vehicles out of the 30 that were added. That's not far off a half and half between data mined and vehicles which we weren't expecting. A fun little game could be, now that we know, or at least assume based on last year, that you'd probably expect somewhere around 10 to 15 of these to arrive in the coming year. Which 10 or 15 out of these ones do you think are the most likely? And speaking of more content, this month I am of course doing the first special projects pack of 2025, and we are also due to be getting an actual Gran Turismo 7 update as well, with the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, as well as, of course, a new Formula 1 car. So, pretty busy month as far as Gran Turismo 7 goes. Stick around for those. I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.